Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jay Neveloff, and I and my partner, Jim Power, are going to be talking for a little while this afternoon about the real estate market and how everything is being affected by COVID. First of all, I want to wish everybody good health, and I hope that you and your families are as unaffected as possible by these recent times. And I look forward to probably eating or dining or having a drink with everybody who's listening, and please stay safe. With that, I see a number of people have joined already, and I'm gonna jump right into this. The biggest question that we're being faced with and by clients and colleagues and friends are, do I pay the rent? Do I pay the mortgage? Or am I getting the rent? Or am I getting paid the debt service? And the question is answered really by what's happening in the market. The New York market is the market I and most of us are closest to. The reports that we're getting as of now, and it's only, we're not quite at a due date for a lot of the payments, but the parenthetical information that I'm hearing from friends and clients and colleagues are that for the most part, rents are being paid. For the most part, debt service is being paid, both in New York and outside of the city. I've heard some second or third hand reports today that in some other cities, rent isn't being paid. And I'm going to be more granular in a moment. But everything that I'm hearing from my clients, from my colleagues, from people throughout the city and across the country is that rent's being paid. Again, for the most part, interest being paid. But let's be a little bit more granular as to what we're talking about. I will first say that in our review of documents, it is very, very rare that there'll be a force majeure provision for the payment of rent or payment of debt service, although I have come across very, very limited instances where the documents seem to say that. But bear in mind that force majeure is really only a deferral. We've been aware of some requests or general reach outs from tenants, from borrowers, asking for deferrals. The response has appropriately been from landlords and from lenders. We're willing to talk, we're willing to be reasonable for the most part, but demonstrate a hardship, show us what the problems are. I think in most instances, the businesses haven't experienced the actual hardship. It has no historical data to show that revenues are down. Businesses are still getting revenues based on accounts receivable, based on billings that were a few months old, based on consumer spending. But again, being more granular, talking about office, Class A office, I think that's generally the case. I believe that examples such as SL Green, Silverstein were smart in anticipating these requests and going out to tenants and actually communicating directly with tenants, saying, we know there's going to be a hardship. We know things are coming. You should first look to the government and the government assistance programs. And then if there's still hardship, let's talk about it. One of the hesitancies any business is going to have in asking for concessions, at least right now where we are in the market, is demonstrating a hardship. We can be further granular. There are national companies that we represent that I'm talking to, and I know who are actively looking at reducing some of their space, some of their satellite offices. I think we'll see those sorts of requests, and that's in the office space. In the retail space, I think everybody recognizes that is a potential disaster. There is no or very little retail activity. Restaurants are either totally closed or working on takeout orders only, which is probably not the case in most instances. And I think that most landlords and lenders of retail owners recognize is going to be that major hiccup with retail. On the residential side, the reports that I'm getting on the market rate rentals is that rent, for the most part, is being paid. I don't have particularly accurate information on rent stabilized apartments in New York, and so we'll see about that. The affordable housing in many instances is almost like a government coupon, and that, of course, is to my knowledge, is being paid and being paid regularly. When you get to the hotel and hospitality sector, that becomes even more of a challenge. Hotels are closed. Lenders of hotels recognize the lenders are closed, and I'm staying in touch with a lot of the lawyers who are very active in the hospitality space. They're spending a lot of their time trying to have a dialogue with their lenders. Portfolio lenders are easy to reach. CMBS and securitized lenders pose the challenges that many of us saw in 2008. You'd have to go to the master servicer first, then hopefully go have a dialogue with the special servicer. The special services are totally overloaded. Some borrowers were reluctant at first to go to special services because that kicked in other fees. But one of the things that we'll come back to later in at least my brief portion of the presentation is how are the challenges that CMBS borrowers facing now going to affect how the market is perceived going forward. Going back to what are the effects in the residential space, we talked about residential rental. In the for sale space, needless to say, the sales of apartments are challenging to do it on a virtual basis. On our condo practice, since we've been able to close, I think we've closed 38 units since March 16th, which is a pleasant surprise. We've seen contracts signed for over a dozen units and contracts being negotiated. We've seen limited instances, really very limited instances, of people who have condo contracts or residential contracts trying to get out. The few that we have, it's not clear whether they're looking for a reduction or they're looking to drop out. But time will tell with that. One of the things that I'm always trying to think about is how is this crisis going to affect the real estate market in the future, and also looking at sectors. If you look at the residential rental market, it will be challenging, although I still have a lot of clients who have enormous monies on the sidelines looking at residential properties where it's workforce, where it's maybe even subsidized because they think they'll get a good price. And people are always going to have a need for residential apartments. Will the tendency of some states, including New York, to adopt legislative sea changes in the industry have an impact? I think that's already been priced into the market. We've seen a big drop in valuations in New York State of residential properties as a result of legislation. And as many of you know, I'm a big opponent of the legislation and think that there's at least some chance it'll be overturned once it ultimately gets to the Supreme Court. It's unclear how those investments will take shape, but I think that residential rental real estate is still going to be an attractive market. Office, if you look at the office sector, how will this pandemic change the way businesses rent space? Will it have, now that we've gotten used to, or many of us have gotten used to telecommuting, will they need less space? Will they be more risk adverse and want to consolidate offices. Not sure how any of that plays out, but I think those are trends that people are trying to figure out. In the hotel space, in New York City, I believe there's already been an oversupply of hotel rooms. The change in use in New York City in particular is going to be challenging because of building code laws, because of zoning laws, and that's something that maybe Jim will address in his part of the conversation. The unions in New York City are also presenting a challenge, and I respect their being advocates for the members, but it does present a challenge when hotels are closed and the hotel union at least tries to have that closure, or presumably temporary closure, trigger pension liability, which they've been through, and there was an arbitration, and the union lost on that arbitration. In the condo market, we're in a situation where there are a number of regulatory and statutory deadlines that might have an impact on the market. For example, there are requirements that in a new construction condominium, the actual first closing be within a year of when the projected first closing was supposed to be. Query whether this delay, the delay in construction, the delay in the pause in the market, how that will affect those deadlines. In a conversion plan, the offering plans need to be declared effective within a certain period of time. I know that Jonathan Cantor, one of my partners, and I have been working with REBNY and have a draft executive order up in Albany. Hopefully that's going to be signed to extend those time periods, but who knows? What's going on in the capital markets? Are the capital markets functioning? It's my impression that many of the deals that have been in the pipeline are continuing. I'm basing that again on our workflow and the workflow of our clients and colleagues. There are some deals where there has been a pause. There are some deals where there has been a repricing, at least on the equity side. As I said earlier, there's an enormous amount of money sitting on the sidelines waiting to be invested in deals. I think that will happen. On the finance side, the lenders clearly hit a pause button. They clearly wanted to see how things were shaking out. There were loan portfolios that were sold. There are loan portfolios already in the market for institutions and lenders that want liquidity. So I think there's more of a pause on the financing, but again, parenthetically, from conversations I'm having, I'm seeing that lenders are seeing the opportunity. They're repricing deals, or they're repricing their target, and I believe that activity will start up reasonably soon. The biggest question in my mind is what happens in New York? What happens as a reaction to all of everything that we've seen? What is this going to do to the real estate market? My belief is that institutions and major investors will allocate a higher percentage of their portfolio to hard assets, whether it's private equity, whether it's real estate, and away from the stock market, which goes up and down and drives everybody crazy. I'm also a believer that New York is the center of the universe, especially the economic universe, and I think that's true of real estate. And my crystal ball, such as it is that New York real estate gets a harder look. The secondary and tertiary cities have been in vogue. I'm not sure how all of this affects the tertiary cities I truly believe that the money is going to come to New York at a greater, with a greater allocation than it has in the past few years. I think we will see a flow of international money coming into New York, and again, other hard assets. So with that, since I'm sort of midway, I'll pause and transition over to Jim. Since I'm so bullish on New York, let's find out what's going on in New York.
Great. Thanks, Jay. And hello, everyone. And I second Jay's good wishes. Let's start off talking about construction in New York. The governor announced on March 27th that non-essential construction must be suspended. As of yesterday, that order is effective through April 29th. Essential construction includes roads, bridges, transit facilities, utilities, healthcare, affordable housing, and homeless shelters. The exception is for emergency construction, which includes emergency work ordered by DOB, restoration of essential services like heat or hot water, or work required to secure sites for health or safety purposes. An application is required to DOB to confirm that the work meets the standards of either essential or emergency construction, though we have received informal and really common sense advice from DOB to the effect that if there's an actual emergency, the work should proceed immediately and you can double back and file with DOB as soon as possible afterwards. So what DOB has done is set up a panel of approximately 10 plan examiners who review the requests for continuation of work, and they've been proceeding with that review very efficiently. As of yesterday afternoon, there were a total of 1,274 applications that have been approved in various categories, which is a really impressive number. It's actually over 1,300 today, I believe. The approvals, again, as of yesterday, included 636 emergency projects, 250 hospital healthcare projects, 2 homeless shelters, and 328 affordable housing projects. There's still some confusion about what qualifies as an affordable project. The official directives have not been entirely clear, but it seems that the panel is mostly interpreting the requirement as 30% affordable, although some representatives of the real estate industry are still questioning whether the standard should be 30% or something lower, so that issue may be revisited. If the requirement is in fact 30%, that ties back to one of the standard thresholds under Affordable New York, 421A, and mandatory inclusionary housing, MIH, under the zoning resolution. A project being constructed with less than 30% of on-site affordable, such as under the voluntary variations of inclusionary housing, or one of the lower percentage variations of 421A and MIH, would not qualify as essential construction. And a project relying on certificates from off-site affordable does not qualify. One issue that developers have run into on both the essential construction and the emergency applications is the question of proof. So for affordable projects, some examiners have required an HPD regulatory agreement be in place, which is typically the case, although some developers have run into difficulties where, for whatever reason, the regulatory agreement has not been recorded yet. We've heard that in other cases, a letter from HPD about the affordable housing commitment has been considered to be sufficient. There have been similar issues of proof on the emergency applications. DOB has looked to have those applications be fully documented with photographs and affidavits, and we understand that some applications submitted without backup documentation have been rejected. DOB has really been on the ball, apparently, in getting examiners out to the sites after approvals, making sure that construction work is limited to the approved scope and making sure that other work is being shut down. At every site, whether essential or emergency construction, social distancing must be maintained, and some sites have been the subject of complaints on those grounds, so there is a real risk of shutdown for failure to follow those procedures.
Jim, can you talk a little bit about what an emergency really is? Because the clients and people that I'm talking to aren't seeing clarity, and obviously are advocates, and they're going to claim everything's an emergency, and many of them have been successful.
Sure, and a lot of people have been trying to push the envelope on that. Really, I think what DOB envisioned and has been trying to follow with the concept of emergency construction is work required to shutdown and to safely transition projects that were in construction to transition them to a non-construction phase, and as well as things that really affect life and safety and health, such as essential building systems and potentially hazardous conditions that may be open or that may develop on construction sites that are under pause. So DOB also has additional guidelines for particular types of sites regarding, say, sites that are in excavation and sites in existing buildings. And we've heard that contractors have been establishing their own procedures to keep sites safe, such as specific procedures for cleaning tools, carrying and handling of materials. One pretty basic example I heard about was that workers are being directed to go to their own cars to fill out paperwork instead of doing it together in a work trailer. In addition, no after-hours variances are being permitted, and on all stalled sites, permits are required to remain active, and owners are required to maintain site safety and perform weekly inspections. In terms of DOB operations in general, DOB's hub they were pretty used to operating remotely, so things have not really changed that much for applications that are fortunate enough to be in the hub. Things are a bit more challenging and slower for applications that are at the borough offices. They are encouraging applications to submit materials electronically, and the examiners have been engaging in one-on-one consultations with applicants. Although the reviews have slowed down, they have been proceeding, and the code consultants I've spoken to say that they've gotten approvals on projects even in the last couple of days. Although, to be clear, although you might get approval of a project, DOB is not issuing any new permits at this point. In my own experience, DOB, or at least the council's office, has been very responsive and helpful over the last month that we've been going through all of this. Just to provide a bit of perspective, I did take a look at what's going on in some other cities around the country. Boston has shut down all work except for emergency work. Fort Lauderdale came up with a no indoor construction permitted policy. In LA, construction is proceeding subject to sites having a coronavirus control plan in place under threat of shutdown. And in San Francisco, they have similar essential categories as to those we have in New York, but their affordable threshold is apparently 10%. So shifting over to the world of public hearings, the governor issued an executive order on March 13 that permits government bodies to conduct meetings remotely as long as the public has the ability to view or listen to the meetings and that the meetings are recorded and transcribed. The Board of Standards and Appeals, BSA, has really led the way in its adoption of remote technology. They've been holding remote hearings for a couple of weeks now, and the reviews have been very favorable. They're using Zoom, and they actually conducted a practice hearing for applicants and members of the public this past Friday. The City Planning Commission has not held any remote hearings yet. That's at least partly because the mayor issued an executive order on March 16th, suspending ULURP and other land use processes. We've heard from City Planning that ULURP may not get restarted again until all 52 community boards, the City Planning Commission, and the City Council all have the capacity to hold hearings and adopt resolutions remotely. City Planning has a task force that's looking into how to do that, and the Council has a working group that's considering how it's going to manage its hearing process and stated meetings and votes. The good news is that City Planning staff are continuing to work on projects that have not yet started ULURP, that are in the pre-certification phase, and we've been having remote meetings with City Planning on various projects, and they have been going well. Their preferred platform is Microsoft Teams, which has some helpful interactive functions, such as the ability to mark up plans in real time. In terms of filing applications, City Planning is accepting filings by FedEx and UPS. They're working on a process to accept applications electronically, but they're not quite there yet. The Landmarks Commission has canceled all public hearings. They did cancel all public hearings through March and through yesterday's hearing. The April 21 hearing is scheduled to go forward. And other agencies that we deal with have been adapting as well. For example, the Department of Finance is now accepting applications for tax lot subdivisions by email. Just On the air rights transactions aspect of things, which is the transactional side of our land use practice, for the most part, developers and air rights parcel owners, they are proceeding with their negotiations, but developers have taken their feet off the gas to some extent. They seem to want to keep the ball rolling, but are certainly not pushing deals ahead the way they otherwise might. To echo Jay's comments, air rights deals don't usually have force majeure provisions or financing contingencies, but we suspect that purchasers may start to request contingencies in new contracts, at least those signed in the next few months, just to protect themselves in case financing is not available. And also echoing Jay's comments, for deals already under contract, we've seen purchasers asking to push the closing date back. In some cases, they don't have that right under the contract because of time of the essence provisions, but so far we've found that sellers have been generally understanding and have granted those requests. So really what we're seeing is that everyone from the agencies to developers to the people at the bargaining table, they're just trying to adapt and be cooperative and make the best of the situation.
So if anybody has any questions, you could submit them. I'm not sure where your button is, depending on whether you're looking at an iPad or a computer. We did get one question, is whether we think existing co-ops and condos are eligible for PPP loans. And the answer is, it truly is unclear, because the regs so far talk about excluding properties, but I'd make the analogy between a condo, perhaps, and a hotel. The question, though, is whether an officer can make the certification that they really are in need, and that's something they're going to have to think about. And what is the likelihood of collecting on a special assessment? The other part of it is if the employees, and we've been talking about this issue in particular a lot internally, whether the employees are, if the employees are actually employees of a managing agent, but the co-op is paying for them, are they bona fide employees of the co-op? I would take the position that they are, because the co-op is effectively the person paying the bill. But it's a good question, and it's not clear what the answer is going to be. And again, one of the questions is going to be the ability to sign the certification that there's a need. Somebody said, are attorneys busier than ever right now? Right now, the honest answer is no, but I think they will be. If Kramer, Levin, if our practice is any indication, we're a little bit below where we normally are, but I'm so happy that people are busy and engaged. We see the hours almost on a daily basis. I don't know what's going to happen as we go further into April. I think on the litigators, I think everybody's going to be doing one form of restructuring or another, just as we did in 2008. I think the bankruptcy people will be busier, and the lawyers are going to have to be that much more creative. Do we expect an increase in defaulting on financial commitments such as mortgages? Sure. I think that all businesses are going to be affected. I'm not sure how fast the government is going to be able to push out all the loans, and the loans aren't going to cover dollar for dollar what all the expenses are. So there is going to be financial distress, and unfortunately, we're all going to have to pay for this at some point. So I think it's going to change the economy for a long time. That's my own spin. Will there be defaults? Are the lenders, are the landlords going to call a default? What will they do? I don't think we've seen that answer yet. There was stalled sites legislation passed after the 2008 financial collapse. Do you expect something like this now? Jim, you want to respond to that?
Yes, that's correct. There was stalled site legislation back in 2008. DOB has already taken some preliminary steps to address sites that they expect are going to, many sites that they expect are going to be stalled for the next period of time, and that's been incorporated in their existing memoranda and directives, and we expect there will be further clarity as we go forward about status of those sites. And they have taken other measures to make sure that permits remain in place and that sites are monitored and remain safe. So the answer is yes.
Now another person asked what we're looking at, what resources we're looking at to understand the economic impact of the New York City area and the building and construction industry. The answer is we're looking at everything. We're looking at all of the email blasts that are going on. We're talking to as many people as we can. It's clients, it's colleagues, it's other lawyers that we transact with on a regular basis. I've listened to a bunch of webinars from different institutions. It's all going to be parenthetical. So I know some of you are on this call. I've been joining a 6 o'clock happy hour, not every evening, but most evenings with a few dozen real estate people, mostly in New York, but across the country. That's a good source also for what's really happening. So some of the webinars or some of the things going out are, I'm not going to say they're total bullshit, but a lot of it's wishful thinking. I think Rebney's been very, very helpful in disseminating information, certainly available.
We have quite a few questions coming in here. I don't know if we have time for them now. Maybe we should take note of the questions and get back to people.
There's one last question. How is the city going to approach any increase in real estate taxation? That's a really good question. A week or so ago, I had a few phone calls with people who are looking at a class action to deal with New York City taxes, to deal with it was actually relating to the hospitality industry and whether the hotels were so badly hit that they can't wait for the tax cert process. So I don't know. But I think these are all things that are gonna take shape over the next few days or weeks. And I think with that, we're at the end of our session. I thank everybody on behalf of Jim and myself. I wish you all good health and speed, and stay in touch. If you have any questions for any of us, feel free to call, and stay safe. Thank you.
Okay, bye now.